The Kansas horizon stretched endlessly, a sea of golden wheat bathed in the late summer sun. Thomas Merrick, barely 20, clutched a small suitcase, his city-bred hands tingling at the scent of earth and dry grass. He had heard of work in the countryside and hoped it would keep him fed and sheltered. The Halloway farmstead appeared at the crest of a small hill, a sprawling estate with a weathered farmhouse, a rusting windmill, and fields that rolled farther than his eyes could follow. The air was still, almost oppressive. The usual chorus of birds and insects was muted. Even the wind whispered with restraint. Thomas's heart quickened. He had been warned of hard work, but the farm itself seemed to warn him of something deeper. Old Mr. Halloway emerged from the porch, leaning on a crooked cane. His eyes were pale, almost clouded, yet sharp as a hawk's. "You're here for work," he said, voice gravelly, carrying the weight of years. "Good. But son, beware the harvest." Thomas chuckled nervously. "I'm sure I can handle it, sir." The old man merely nodded, then turned back into the shadows of the farmhouse. Thomas felt a shiver. Something about the farm was watching. The next morning, Thomas followed the path to the barnyard. Only 3 workers were there, and they moved like specters, faces drawn and pale. They barely acknowledged his arrival, their hands already blistered from scythes and sheaves. Thomas noticed the footprints in the dust. Hundreds of them, overlapping and fading, yet none appeared fresh. Each step he took seemed to echo unnaturally. The wheat swayed gently, but it felt deliberate, as though it leaned toward or away from him, depending on his gaze. He tried to ask about previous workers, but the words caught in his throat. The men looked away, muttering under their breath. Thomas began to feel an unfamiliar tightness in his chest, a mixture of dread and fascination. That night, he lay on the creaking bunk, listening to the distant howl of coyotes. The farm was silent, but it hummed with something that felt alive, something that had claimed people before. By dawn, Thomas stood at the edge of the field, scythe in hand. He swung it awkwardly, trying to mimic the motions of the seasoned workers. And then he heard it, a soft, almost human murmur drifting through the stalks. He froze. The rustling wheat seemed to shift around him, bending and whispering secrets he could almost understand. Caleb, the wiry worker beside him, noticed Thomas's gaze. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked, voice low. Thomas swallowed. What is it?" "The wheat. It listens. It remembers. It waits," Caleb said, eyes darting nervously. Thomas laughed nervously, dismissing it as superstition, but the sound persisted, curling around his ears, luring his attention deeper into the field. He began to sense a presence behind the stalks, a shadow just out of reach, and a cold chill ran through his spine. Late that afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Thomas noticed Caleb moving unusually, hesitant, distracted. And then, like a candle snuffed by an unseen hand, Caleb vanished. Thomas called out, panic rising in his chest, but the wheat swallowed his voice. The swaying stalks offered no hint, no trail, no clue. It was as if Caleb had never existed. Mr. Halloway appeared from the farmhouse, eyes sad yet knowing. "They always leave," he said quietly. "Some are taken by the land, some by themselves." Thomas couldn't comprehend it. Taken by the land? He had come for work, not a nightmare. That night, sleep eluded him. Every creak, every whisper, and every rustle of the wheat seemed magnified. He felt the hunger of the farm, not for food, but for attention, for fear, for the essence of the living. As the golden sun set, the wheat shimmered unnaturally. Thomas noticed shadows moving against the swaying fields, elongated human-like forms. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and the shapes remained, dancing just out of reach. Sarah, the only other woman on the farm, grabbed his arm. Her grip was firm. "Don't look," she whispered, eyes wide. "It watches those who notice." Thomas felt the hairs on his neck rise. The wind carried a faint, sorrowful laughter, almost pleading. He realized the land had a consciousness, aware of fear, attuned to despair. That night, Thomas's dreams were filled with pale figures emerging from the wheat, their faces blank, reaching silently for something. He awoke drenched in sweat, the oppressive silence of the farm pressing down on him. Escape seemed impossible, understanding, urgent. Seeking answers, Thomas explored the farmhouse. Dust motes danced in slanted sunlight as he entered a small study. On the shelf, hidden behind old ledgers, lay a tattered journal. It belonged to Mr. Halloway's late wife. Her handwriting trembled, recounting a harvest decades prior where workers had vanished one by one. She wrote of a pact she had made with the land, a plea for protection that came with a terrible cost. The wheat, she explained, was alive. It consumed not bodies alone, but the attention and fear of those who worked it. And the journal ended abruptly, as if she had been interrupted, leaving Thomas staring at the ceiling in disbelief. This was no ordinary farm. Thomas realized, with a growing chill, that the field itself demanded more than labor. It demanded surrender, willingly or unwillingly. Thomas found Sarah near the edge of the fields, hands dirty, eyes on the horizon. He shared the journal and the whispers. Her reaction was calm, almost resigned. "I've known since I arrived," she admitted softly. "The farm, it asks for more than work. It asks for your essence. If you listen too closely, it takes part of you." Thomas felt his heart constrict. The field wasn't malevolent. It was a predator, patient, calculating. Together, they formed a plan. Work steadily, avoid panic, and respect the land. As they moved through the fields, Thomas noticed the wheat seemed to respond. Every gesture, every whispered thanks seemed to calm it. The realization was startling. Fear fed the farm. Respect could shield them. The night of the full moon arrived, bathing the fields in silver light. A strange glow emanated from the wheat. Thomas and Sarah watched as translucent forms emerged, pale, half-seen workers from earlier harvests. One figure turned to Thomas, lips moving silently. His chest tightened with the pull of something unseen. The wheat seemed to lean toward him, beckoning. Sarah grabbed his arm. "It feeds on despair," she said urgently. "Only hope protects us." Together they moved carefully through the glowing wheat, whispering words of gratitude, keeping their spirits steady. The fields tested them, and Thomas realized courage was the key. Fear was a trap, mindfulness, a shield. Sarah explained the farm's hidden law. Those who disappear succumb to impatience, anger, or dread. The wheat rewards patience, gratitude, and respect. Thomas reflected on the irony, an entity of soil and sun teaching lessons about humanity. He began to speak to the wheat softly, thanking it for the bounty and for its patience. Every bundle was handled with care, each movement deliberate. Slowly, the oppressive whispers faded. The wheat seemed to sway gently, almost protective. The farm's hunger receded. Thomas understood. The land wasn't evil. It demanded mindfulness, and by meeting its expectations, he could survive and thrive. One misty morning, a stranger appeared at the edge of the field. A wandering preacher, drawn by rumors of the haunted harvest, carried no tools, only a calm presence. He spoke softly to the wheat, blessing the land. The stalks bent back, opening paths as though recognizing him. Thomas and Sarah were amazed. The wheat responded to something beyond labor or fear. That night, The preacher told stories of lands where farmers treated crops with reverence and communities prospered. Thomas felt a kinship forming, a hope blossoming. Perhaps the whispers weren't only warnings, they were teachers. He went to sleep that night with a newfound resolve. Respect, gratitude, and calmness would guide him through the harvest. The silence of the farm, he realized, was not emptiness, it was expectation. Thomas, Sarah, and the preacher began the harvest with newfound purpose. Each step was deliberate, every bundle placed with care. Thomas whispered words of gratitude to the wheat as he worked, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. The preacher moved slowly through the fields, blessing each row, murmuring stories of harmony between humans and land. Even Sarah, usually quiet, spoke softly to the stalks, thanking them for their endurance. Gradually, the wheat seemed to respond. The oppressive hum of whispers softened into a gentle rustle. The air no longer felt heavy, but vibrant, as if the land itself were breathing with them. For the first time, Thomas noticed shapes in the distance, figures moving with ease through the stalks. They were the missing workers, visible yet unharmed, their pale forms slowly gaining solidity. Hope, Thomas realized, could pierce even the farm's darkness. Afternoon brought clouds that rolled in with sudden ferocity. Rain began to lash the fields, turning the paths into rivers of mud. Panic prickled at their minds. The wheat groaned under the weight of water, bending as if to crush them. Sarah grasped Thomas's arm. "Fear feeds it," she warned. "We can't give it that." Together, they shielded the wheat where possible, moving methodically, speaking softly, and offering words of encouragement. The preacher's calm voice carried across the field, steadying their hearts. Hours passed, yet the storm softened inexplicably. By evening, the land was calm again, the wheat standing tall, glistening with droplets. Thomas realized the farm tested their composure, their patience, courage, and hope. By remaining steadfast, they had passed. As the harvest neared completion, the previously lost workers began to appear fully, stepping out of the wheat like sunlight breaking through clouds. Caleb emerged first, shaking, his eyes wide with disbelief. We were gone," he stammered. "But you kept hope alive. You saved us." Thomas felt a surge of relief. The farm had no malice. It demanded balance. Those who succumbed to despair vanished temporarily, but those who endured with courage and respect could emerge unscathed. The missing workers hugged one another silently, their presence no longer spectral but solid, breathing again. Thomas understood. The wheat wasn't merely alive. It mirrored the human spirit. Patience, respect, and hope were the currency it demanded. Walking through the fully harvested fields at sunset, Thomas and Sarah reflected on their ordeal. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unseen, yet emerged intact. The preacher said softly, "The land is a mirror. It shows what lives within you. Patience, hope, and respect yield a reward. Fear and despair are lessons." Thomas nodded, gazing over the golden expanse. He realized the farm had tested not only their labor, but their hearts. The wheat shimmered like fire, proof that life, even in hardship, could reward resilience and gratitude. The moral was clear. The harvest wasn't just about wheat, it was about understanding the rhythm of life itself. That evening, the farmhouse glowed with candlelight. Workers gathered around a long, rough-hewn table, sharing bread, stew, and laughter. Thomas felt a joy he hadn't known in years. Mr. Halloway watched from his porch, eyes glinting. "You've learned what most never do," he said. "The harvest isn't just grain, it's wisdom. The land teaches those who listen." Thomas realized that the farm had reshaped him. Fear had been transformed into mindfulness, despair into gratitude. The workers' laughter echoed across the golden fields, a testament to resilience. The land had demanded more than labor. It had demanded respect, patience, and courage. And they had given it willingly. Before leaving, Mr. Halloway handed Thomas a small satchel of wheat seeds. "Plant these in your own fields," he said. "Carry the lessons forward. Respect the land, respect life, and it will sustain you." Thomas clutched the seeds, feeling the weight of responsibility. This was more than a gift. It was a challenge, a trust placed in his hands. Sarah waved from the porch, eyes shining. The preacher nodded silently, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared journey. Thomas understood that the harvest of 1916 was never about punishment. It was a calling, a lesson in resilience, humility, and mindfulness. As he walked away, the golden wheat shimmered like a memory etched into his soul. Back in the city, Thomas planted the seeds in a small garden behind his modest house. He tended them carefully, remembering the lessons of the Halloway farmstead. Each stalk grew tall and golden, a living memory of courage and patience. Neighbors admired the wheat, unaware of the story behind it. Thomas shared the wisdom he had gained: respect for nature, mindfulness in work, and hope in adversity. The whispers of the Kansas wind seemed to follow him, reminders that life demanded attention and care. The terror of the harvest remained a memory, but the wisdom endured, growing stronger with each passing season. Over the years, Thomas became a mentor to young farmers. He taught not only the techniques of planting and reaping, but also the philosophy that had saved his life. Fear, he explained, was the enemy of growth. Patience, respect, and gratitude cultivated not just crops, but character. Communities thrived when they embraced this understanding. The golden wheat he grew became symbolic, a bridge between humans and nature. Tales of the haunted Kansas farmstead spread quietly, a cautionary yet inspiring legend. Thomas realized the greatest harvest wasn't grain, but wisdom, compassion, and the courage to endure trials. As Thomas aged, he often reflected on the eerie silence of the Halloway farmstead. The experience had taught him that life itself was a harvest of choices. People could vanish into despair, anger, or apathy, but they could also be restored through mindfulness, hope, and respect. The missing workers' return symbolized resilience and the human capacity to recover from darkness. Walking through his golden fields, Thomas smiled. The farm had taught him that life's greatest harvests weren't measured in bushels, but in courage, empathy, and the wisdom to face uncertainty with grace. One crisp autumn morning, Thomas received a letter from Sarah. She had returned to Kansas, running a small farmstead of her own. Inside the envelope was a single golden wheat stalk. A note accompanied it. "The land remembers those who honor it." And so do I. Thomas held the stalk close. He understood now that the harvest of 1916 had never been about punishment. It had been about awakening. The silence, the disappearances, the whispers. They were teachers, guiding humans to humility and hope. Even the darkest silence, he realized, could nurture the brightest growth. The wheat had given him wisdom, and through it, Thomas would live a life of purpose, gratitude, and resilience.